I'm Bobbi Fischer, and this is my Aesthetically Awkward Podcast, a show where we dive into all things aesthetics, health, wellness, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare provider before making any decisions in your personal health journey. Now let's get into it. Thanks for joining me on another week of the podcast. Excited that you're here, and we're going to have a quick chat about thyroid health. I just want you to recognize when something feels off and understand that it's not normal and it's okay to advocate and speak to your provider about the symptoms you're feeling. The two most common lab values that providers will check are usually a TSH, or a thyroid stimulating hormone, and a T4. Your pituitary gland is responsible for sending out a signal telling your thyroid what to do. If we check your TSH and it's elevated, it's actually your brain saying, hey, we need you to produce more thyroid hormone. We see that TSH climbing. It means that you don't have enough active circulating thyroid hormone. It means that your thyroid is underactive, or you have hypothyroidism. Now, if we check your TSH and it's suppressed or it's really low, your brain is saying, pump the brakes, kid. We've got enough, or we have too much active thyroid hormone. And that is usually indicative of hyperthyroidism. TSH is actually a communication signal between the brain, or your pituitary gland, and the thyroid, not a direct measure of how much usable thyroid hormone is in your tissues. The conventional reference range is usually somewhere between 0.4 to 4.5. Depending on which lab you're using, it may go as high as 5. In conventional medicine, if your TSH is within that normal range, especially below 4.5, it's often written off as normal unless you're pregnant or symptomatic enough to investigate further. If their TSH is consistently above 2.5 and they have symptoms, optimal is different than conventional medicine's normal standards. The TSH is going to fluctuate in times of stress, illness, calorie restriction, poor sleep, pregnancy. Another common lab value that we check is free T4, or thyroxine. Free T4 is the unbound portion of thyroxine that is actively circulating in your blood. It's essentially a raw material hormone. It has to be converted into T3 to become metabolically active. Conventional medicine is usually looking from anywhere from 0.8 to 1.8. It may vary depending on the lab you're using. As long as it falls within that range, especially with a normal TSH, your provider will usually say there's nothing wrong with your thyroid. Looking at it from a functional or an optimal standpoint, we prefer to see the T4 in the mid to upper half of the reference range. If someone's T4 is technically normal, but it's at the bottom of the reference range and you have symptoms, we're talking fatigue, cold intolerance, constipation, unexplained weight gain, then we're starting to think maybe you have subclinical hypothyroidism. Another lab that we may check to validate that is your free T3. Try iodothyronine. Say that 3 times fast. Free T3 is the actual active thyroid hormone. It's what binds to the receptors in your cells. It drives your metabolism, your heat production, heart rate, your intestinal motility, your mood stability, and your energy levels. Only about 20% of your T3 is made directly by the thyroid. Most of it is converted from your T4 in the liver, gut, and your peripheral tissues. The conventional reference range is anywhere from 2.3 to 4.2, varying depending on the lab that you're using. If it's within that range and your TSH is normal, conventional medicine will say there's nothing wrong with your thyroid. It's working just fine. Moving over to that functional standpoint, or the optimal lens, we prefer to see the T3 in the upper half of the range, usually around 3.2 to 4, depending on the lab. Sometimes higher depending on your symptoms. If T3 is low normal, someone has classic hypothyroid symptoms, it might suggest that there's an issue with your ability to convert T4 into T3. You can have enough of the raw material, but if you can't convert it efficiently, you're not going to feel your best. Another value that we check that you may not see as often in conventional medicine unless you're going to see an endocrinologist is the reverse T3. Reverse T3 is an inactive form of your T3. When your body converts T4, it can either convert it into T3 or inactive reverse T3. So there's 2 pathways. Reverse T3, it acts like a brake system. It occupies receptors without activating them. When it rises or when it's elevated, you usually see that in times of stress, inflammation, acute illness, chronic calorie restriction, or trauma. It can also rise in chronic cortisol dysregulation. Reverse T3, it's rarely checked unless we are specifically investigating rare syndromes or critical illness. The reverse T3 reference range depending on the lab you use, is usually around 9 to 24. If we are talking optimal values, we don't want it to be sitting in the high range, especially if your T3 is low normal. Now we're going to talk a little bit about antibodies, starting with thyroid peroxidase antibodies. You may see them referred to as TPO antibodies. This is measuring your immune activity directed at thyroid peroxidase, which is an enzyme involved in the thyroid hormone production. Elevated TPO antibodies are most commonly associated with Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Conventional medicine will say that your antibodies are negative if they're less than 30 or 34. Again, the reference range will vary depending on the lab you used. Any elevation above negative is clinically relevant because it suggests that there is some sort of immune activation against your thyroid. Your immune system is attacking your thyroid. And your antibodies can be elevated for years before your TSH is actually ever affected, before that feedback system with your pituitary gland is showing up in your lab work. This can be a silent immune assault against your thyroid. Our goal is to reduce immune activation. We do that by improving nutrient status, supporting your gut health, monitoring the progression through repeat lab work, and checking in with you about your symptoms. Another test that we look at is thyroglobulin antibodies. Thyroglobulin is a protein involved in thyroid hormone synthesis, and it's another marker of autoimmune thyroid involvement. Functional medicine looks at positive thyroglobulin antibodies as a very early immune signal. Even mild elevations might explain fluctuating symptoms, especially if we pair it with active TPO antibodies. Conventional medicine usually only looks at labs that will diagnose overt hypothyroidism. And by overt, I mean your TSH is clearly elevated. Your free T4 is clearly low. Providers who work through an optimal lens prefer to identify subclinical or early dysfunction because it's much easier to intervene earlier than it is to wait until your immune system has attacked your thyroid tissue and destroyed it. We're looking at the TSH, that feedback signal from your pituitary gland. Is it starting to creep up? Is it on the upper end of that reference range? Your free T3, is it within the conventional medical standard normal limits, but on the lower end? Maybe you have subclinical hypothyroidism. Are your antibodies present? Maybe that's a signal that later down the road, if we don't intervene now, that you're going to develop an autoimmune response. What are your symptoms? Do you have those concerns with unexplained weight gain, fatigue, cold intolerance? Do you have impaired conversion? Your free T4 is normal, but your free T3 is low or low normal. What's your reverse T3 look like? Conventional medicine is excellent in treating disease. Functional medicine is rooted in trying to identify dysfunction before it becomes disease. Those are the key differences. I'm not advocating for over-treating with thyroid hormones. Too much of a good thing is still a bad thing. Too much thyroid hormone could increase risk of arrhythmias. It could increase your risk for bone loss. It can increase symptoms of anxiety, insomnia. It can cause strain on your cardiac system. So we're not trying to push numbers aggressively. We're trying to gently, slowly, strategically optimize. We're trying to improve your overall quality of life, improve your longevity, and give you real cues as to what's happening in your body. That wraps up my mini dive into thyroid hormones. If you've ever been told your labs are normal, but you still just don't feel like yourself, I hope maybe this episode gives you the language needed to address your symptoms and have that discussion with your provider. Your body is communicating symptoms to you, and it's okay to advocate for yourself. Thyroid health isn't about just one number. It's not just your TSH. It's not just your T4. It's not just medication. It's hormones, immune function, stress, nutrition, sleep. Have these conversations with your provider. Advocate for yourself. Ask questions. Ask for the full thyroid panel if something feels off. If you're local to Danville and you need a full thyroid panel, we have an excellent cash pay program here at our clinic. I appreciate being here. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you in the next episode.